All right, let's get your Pro Tools up and running. The first thing you have to do is you have to get the sound card in your computer or an interface or whatever configured in your computer. Sometimes there's going to be sometimes there's a driver. Sorry, there's a little bit of distortion here. Sometimes you're going to have to install a driver. Sometimes you don't. My Focusrite Scarlett here, because I'm plugging it into a Mac, I don't have to do anything. I plug it in. The computer recognizes it. Pro Tools recognizes it. It's good to go. Oh, hope you like my hat. With Windows, it's going to be a little bit different, right? So let's talk about the driver. So where are you going to get the driver? Well, the driver oftentimes comes with the device, or you go to the website of the people who manufacture it. You download that driver for your interface, right? You go ahead and install that. When you plug it in, your computer should be able to find it, Windows or Mac. You should be able to find that driver because it's already in the computer. Sometimes they want you to plug the device in first, then download the driver and install it. Just make sure you know what you're supposed to do. Sad to say. Well, here I won't say. It's sad to say. With Windows, you're going to have a lot more trouble, more than likely, than you certainly can have way more trouble than a Mac. And it's not because the Windows machines are inferior to the Mac. The thing about it is the only people that make Macs are Apple. That's it. And Apple knows what hardware goes in there. Apple's not buying some off-brand whatever and stick it in there. Actually, Macs are usually, well, not usually, they're always built with premium parts, right? Intel motherboards, Intel processors, Intel chipsets, good video cards, the good stuff, right? All that stuff, you can build a PC out of all that stuff, right? In fact, if you get like a really nice HP workstation, you're basically got a Mac, right? Or the Mac is a HP, which regardless, right? The problem with Windows machines, whether you're buying the computer from Dell or you're building it yourself, the components that go in there, there's no telling what goes in there, right? It could be, who knows, right? The chipset could be whatever. The motherboard could be whatever. I mean, there's no telling. Who knows, right? If you buy your computer from like Dell, that's not even. You're not really assured of getting anything that's consistent because they're always shopping for the cheapest parts, right? I think I've had the most luck with Lenovo computers, honestly. So configuring the sound card, getting the sound card to work with a DAW in Windows might be not always, but it might be more difficult, right? So you've got to get it configured, get the latest drivers, make sure it's working. Once you've got your sound card or your interface configured, up and running, and you know it's working properly, at that point, then you kick in Pro Tools, right? So let me show you some stuff with Pro Tools, right? Let me pull up a session here. There we go. And here we go, right? I'm just gonna do this here. Let's, whatever, this is fine. Just whatever. I'm gonna put it on the desktop so we can get rid of it easy. There we go. So there we go. Let me show you some stuff here. How to get it configured. Actually, we don't even need, let me close this. We don't even need this here. Let me go ahead and quit that. So let me show you here. Let me close that window so I'm not distracting. Here's how you set it up, right? You go to the setup menu and you look at your hardware. You take a look at that, and it's kind of showing you what hardware you're actually using. I'm using this thing called loopback audio. Here is where you can actually pull up the configuration, wherever. It could be a driver or whatever, right? A little app that your computer uses, right? This, again, same thing with the Mac or the PC. It'll launch an app or the driver or some other thing, depending on what you got in there, right? If I go to setup again, I go to the playback engine, right? Let me pull that over, right? This playback engine tells Pro Tools what hardware to use to play back and record from, right? So right now I'm using this thing called loopback audio, and this is so I can actually take the output of Pro Tools and run it into the software that allows me to record these videos. But if I click on it, you'll notice I've got a bunch of stuff there. A lot of this stuff you won't see, right? For example, multi-output device is another thing I use for recording videos and doing our online classes. Same thing with loopback, Soundflower. These are all things that I use for our classes, right? Now, if you take a look here, Scarlett, right? I actually have my Scarlett plugged in, right? And because my Scarlett is plugged into the computer, even though I'm not using it to play back, I could actually use that for my Pro Tools system if I wanted to, right? Again, once it's plugged in, it sees it and it knows, right? Built-in output, that's just the sound card in my Mac, right? Built-in microphone, that's again just the built-in microphone in my Mac, right? That's not what you're listening to. You're actually listening to this lavalier mic here, right? And then Pro Tools Aggregate is a way of combining different things. Like, for example, I can combine my built-in output and microphone with my Scarlett, and all three of those things could be working together in my Pro Tools system if I wanted them to, right? And that's kind of what this multi-output device thing, it's like an aggregate thing, right? Notice there's HDMI. The reason it says HDMI is because I've got this other video. It's just a TV. It's not a computer monitor, and it's connected through HDMI, and it has speakers in it. And Pro Tools says, well, if you want me to, I'll send my audio to the TV through the HDMI cable, right? So that's how you do that, right? So make sure once you've got your hardware configured and it's working right on your computer, what you're gonna do is come into the playback engine and choose it. It may not work right off the bat, right? Because it doesn't know what you want to use. It doesn't read your mind. So you're gonna have to come into Pro Tools and tell it to play out of whatever device you've got hooked up to your computer for audio, right? Whether it's the sound card or anything else, right? Now, here's a gotcha. Sometimes when you set something up, like for example, I've got my my Scarlett plugged in to Pro Tools, and let's say I use the Scarlett to record and play back a bunch of stuff, right? And I'm working on it, and it sounds good, right? And then I decide I want to go outside and work on my project outside, right? I can't go to the park, I can't go to the gym, I can't go to school, right? Oops, sorry. And so I'm going to go outside and edit my project, right? So I unhook my Scarlett, and then I go outside. Well, now Pro Tools doesn't see the Scarlett, right? And so it can't use the Scarlett, and so it's going to randomly choose whatever it wants to use, whatever it thinks I want to use, right? It may not be built-in output, it may not, whatever, right? So sometimes you might end up, Pro Tools be working great, right? And then a day later, for whatever reason, you try using Pro Tools again and it doesn't work for whatever reason, right? Well, it's probably because you unplugged your interface, you did something and Pro Tools defaulted to some other thing. Whenever you don't hear audio coming out of your Pro Tools system, the most likely problem is you just have to come over here and make sure that it's coming out of the device that you think it is, right? So, right? Here's another gotcha. Let me show you this. Right? I'm going to leave it on loop back. Oh, just really quick. For this thing here where it says 502 samples, Your system will probably say something bigger. Mine, because I'm using this loopback thing, it's stuck on, it's the highest is 512, but it can go to 1024. It can actually go to 1024 samples, right? This is the buffer, right? I'm not going to explain the buffer now. I could maybe do it in class, but the buffer, here's how to work the buffer. When you're recording stuff, you want the buffer to be small, right? Because if it's large like it is, you're going to hear a latency, meaning there's going to be a delay, a lag between the time that you play something and when you hear it, right? Again, I'll explain later. So what you need to do is make it a small buffer. 64 samples you probably won't notice. 128 maybe, but it probably won't bother you, right? So when you're recording stuff, you want your buffer to be small. But then when it comes time to mix and edit, especially mixing, you want to raise your buffer to the highest one that you can possibly manage, right? This is cool, right? Dynamic plugin processing. This is when you put in plugins on a track. The dynamic plugin processing means that the plugin is only active and using CPU cycles. It's only, your computer is only working on that plugin when there's audio to be played. As soon as it's off of a clip and there's silence on that track, the plugin turns off and your computer is no longer dealing with it, right? So you want to have that clicked. You don't need the video engine unless you're running a video. This, I've got it set to something here because, again, I'll explain it some other time, but for yours, it defaults to normal and you should leave it on normal, right? I'm doing something a little bit different. All right, so there you go. Here's another place where you want to check, all right? If I go to I/O setup, right? Again, setup. Let me close that here. Hold on a second. I'm going too fast. I'm going to go to the setup menu here, setup, come down to I/O, all right? I click the I/O setup. This describes the ins and outs of my Pro Tools system, right? Based on the device that you've got hooked up, right? Again, I'm at loopback, and so this is what I'm using is loopback. If it was using my Scarlett, it would be the Scarlett. If it was my sound card, it would be the sound card, right? Or if we're at ACC and we've got the Orion, there's 32 ins and 32 outs on that Orion, and so that's what would show up here, right? And so anyway, this is what we got right here. Here comes a kitty, right? He's a ferocious beast, a killer. Anyway, this describes the ins and outs of our Pro Tools system based on the hardware that's hooked up and we're using, right? Right now, that's, I guess, their abbreviation for loopback, right? So that's my hardware. At ACC, you might have, I don't know if you've ever noticed, up here it says Orion, and you'll see 32 instead of 2. You see 32 going all the way this way, and you'll see another 32 going down this way, right? And it's like a matrix, right? And so this, you got to make sure this is correct, right? Now let me show you. There's a lot to it, and there's a lot of cool things you can do here. But again, I want you guys to up and running quickly. So what I'm going to do is let me show you the quick and dirty way to make this happen, right? First, I'm going to go like this. I'm going to delete that, right? So I highlight under the input tab, I select that, and I hit the delete key, right? Then I go to the output tab, hit that one, and delete that one as well. And I go to bus. I want to select all of these and delete them, right? And I don't want to go through all of them. I want to select them all. In Pro Tools, if you're on the Mac, you hold Option down and select. On Windows, it's Alt, right? I hold that down like that, and I delete all of those. I don't know if I told you, but I did for a long time. I did Pro Tools on a Windows machine. Yeah, I did on a Windows machine. It's my personal machine, right? All the studios that I worked in all had Macs, but at home I had a Windows machine. It actually worked. It was fine, right? So that's why I know all the shortcuts. Anyway, so under the input tab, what we're going to do is, again, this is the quick and easy way to do this, right? So it'll work. Under the input tab, you hit default, down here. Right? Again, default is based on what playback engine you're using, right? And the driver. And so when I hit default, Pro Tools asks the computer, hey computer, what are the ins and outs? What is the configuration of this device? Blah, 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 right? And the computer tells it, right? And then it'll pop up right here, right? This is why you have to configure the hardware first, and you got to make sure it's working right. Because if you don't configure the hardware right, if it's wrong, it'll be wrong in Pro Tools, right? So then once I got that one, I go to output, and I hit default once again. Sure enough, there it is. So my Scarlett only has 2 ins and 2 outs. That's why you only see 2 ins and 2 outs. I'm going to come over here to the bus tab, and I'm going to hit default. And there we go. And that makes them all default, right? Insert, I can't do inserts. You guys, depending on how many ins and outs you have, I can't do inserts in Pro Tools because I only have 2 ins and 2 outs. But at ACC, you'll see a bunch of them down here, right? Mic preamps. There are some mic preamps that can be remote controlled from Pro Tools, right? This is kind of handy dandy. I used to do when I did a lot of symphony work, we would hang the microphones in the symphony where the symphony was playing in the concert hall, and we would sit the mic preamps backstage, and then the control room was really far away. The control room was like 1,500 feet away from the stage, really far away, right? Now, we don't want to have the mic preamps in the control room because running a mic level signal, which is kind of weak, we don't want that weak signal to have to be run all the way, the 1,500 feet, all the way back to the control room. What we want to do is bring them up to line level backstage and then send the really strong hot signal back to the control room. So we actually had some mic preamps that were remote controllable. There we go. And that's for some other day, right? But there we go, ready to go. Now, once you've got this, you want to save this setup, right? And let's say I'm going to export this. So I'm going to go over here to export settings, right? And I'm going to say loopback setting. Loopback setting. I should name it that. There we go. And I save it. Ta-da! And now we're good to go. And that's how you set up your Pro Tools system. It ought to be ready to go. And you should be able to record, playback, right? If you did all that stuff and you did it the right way and it's not working, backtrack. There's something wrong with the computer, right? Let me think here. What else? I think that'll do it. All right. Be back. Back soon.